right. It looks like we are live, but I see that participant count going up. So I'll give folks 20 to 30 seconds to join from the lobby, and then we'll get started. Good morning, I guess, for you, Michelle. How are you?
I'm doing really well. The rain has cleared out here in California. We've had a beautiful couple days.
So I'm in Dallas for a couple of days, and it is colder here than where I left in New York. And there's a lot of snow on the ground, or at least some snow on the ground, which they don't do well with here in Dallas, apparently.
Is the whole city shut down?
Yeah, it's like I'm in this co-working space and it's completely empty. So 50,000 square feet just for me. All right. Well, we can kick it off. We'll let folks join as they enter the lobby. Really excited to host this virtual event today on affordable housing. We have two all-star panels coming up, but first wanted to kick it off with a fireside chat with Michelle Boyd, who is the Chief Strategy Officer at the Terner Housing Innovation Labs. Welcome, Michelle. We're really glad to have you.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited for this conversation.
Yeah, so let's jump right in. I'm sure some folks in our audience are wondering just what is the Terner Housing Innovation Labs?
Absolutely. So Terner Labs, or as we call ourselves, we're the nonprofit affiliate of the Terner Center for Housing Innovation at UC Berkeley. So Terner Center is a policy and research institute based out of California, Berkeley, that really focuses on bold ideas around housing affordability in both policy and private sector practice. And we cover the full range of housing, from homeownership to multifamily rental to services for people experiencing homelessness, and everything from home finance to construction to service provision, and everything in between. I'd say we're most well known for a lot of our work around zoning, likely, and around construction technology and new construction methods. Terner Labs is, as a nonprofit affiliate, we build programs and also create products that help advance the goals of the Terner Center. And so one of our hallmark programs is a program called the Housing Lab, which is an accelerator program for early stage innovators across the country, nonprofits, for-profit businesses that have really cool ideas that we want to help nurture and scale. We also have a data tool, which I may talk more about, that helps city planners think through zoning, and are doing a lot of work around construction technology in particular.
Awesome. And for folks that are joining in, feel free to take advantage of the Q&A. I'm happy to answer questions on the fly, but I've got a list of questions to go with now. Until then. So, looking at the news over the past 6 months, unfortunately, the story for affordability is not a great one. You look at home prices being up 40 to 50% over the past couple of years. Mortgage rates have doubled over the past year. Inventory continues to flirt with all-time lows. What is the good news on affordability that we can share with this audience, Michelle?
It's not good. I think we're coming into the stark understanding. If the pandemic helped wake up the common person to understand housing costs and racial inequity, I think the rising interest rates have really helped underscore the housing supply shortage, and think through how we got here over the past several decades of underbuilding in most major job centers across the country where people actually want to live. But you asked me about good news. I think some of the good trends that we're starting to see that have been bubbling over the past 5 years have really been about zoning. So confronting the fact that most of the country has a long legacy of exclusionary zoning. So zoning in ways that only promote single family development on larger lot sizes. And we're starting to see bright spots across the country in places like Minnesota and Oregon and California, where these paradigms of how we think we can build our cities are really being challenged. To think through how we can build more cities close into our current urban landscape. And so in California, we really where we're based, really started thinking about this through second units on properties or accessory dwelling units in single family homes since 2017. And we've continued to tweak the laws to the point where Now there's some cities, I think it's LA, has like 20,000 ADU permits. So really starting to think through, it's really starting to see that come to fruition. It took 4 years or more, 5 years for it to, from the first time that law passed, but is really a bright spot. In California, we've also had a couple changes over the past few years that have made it so the state has more legal ability to hold cities accountable for how much zoning they're building. And so this specifically can help is incentivizing and forcing more housing production in higher income areas that might be really close to downtown job centers, for example. I think we're actually about to see some of this put to the test in the next couple of days, where we have this process called housing element, where every 8 years cities have to put together plans for how much housing they're going to build or allow for the next 8 years. And cities that have failed that process and are still uncompliant, I think by Wednesday, are going to have their local powers over zoning rescinded. And so I think a lot's going to change on who's compliant and not compliant over the next couple of days, but I think it'll be a real test of this state ability to hold cities accountable for allowing for the level of housing production that's needed to accommodate our population. So lots moving there. And I think a lot of folks are looking at California as they think about accommodating rising population in cities across the country, particularly in the Southwest or other areas that have spiked more recently. Another bright spot, and we can talk about this more later, but is kind of more a signal, we're not yet to see it yet, but is in the Inflation Reduction Act last year, there was a ton of money set aside for greening our buildings across the country. And a lot of that money has potential to spur new housing supply and retrofitting of existing housing supply. And so there's still a lot of detail that's needed to see how that will take action over the next few months. But a lot in the housing community, probably a lot in this call, have been trying to track that to figure out how that money can be used in ways that increase housing. So that's something we're keeping track of and are eager to see come to fruition.
In that scenario where a locality doesn't have good enough plans for housing, does the state take over control, or is there like an independent body that takes over control of that zoning process?
It's actually a law called the Builder's Remedy, and it kicks in when cities are out of compliance with their housing element. It means that if a developer proposes a building that is at least 20% affordable, so set aside for 20% of people at a certain income level, or 100%, I think, at moderate income level, that building will automatically be approved. And so it's basically like a backup law that streamlines approvals for buildings. And that gets removed as soon as the city's compliant, but then anything that gets approved while the city's uncompliant stands.
And as California goes frequently with policy, not just housing policy, eventually so goes the rest of the nation. So I guess fingers crossed.
Yeah, I think this will be a real test. This happened, I believe, in one city in California before, and it caused this big political, oh my goodness. And so we're watching what happens this week to see how many cities will get forced into this builder's remedy, and then what political situation will follow.
So your organization makes a lot of investments into companies that are helping us solve all sorts of issues, affordability being one of those issues. So are there any investments that you've made or that you're planning to make that are going to help us solve affordability issues on a national scale?
That's our goal. So I hope so. We work with companies and organizations at pretty early stages, but we select for and look for ones that we think have a potential for national influence. A couple ideas that we've supported through a program over the past few years. One of them, I'd say one theme of models is models that are thinking about infill housing development. So these kind of smaller housing developments that can fit into this new zoning frameworks that we're seeing pop up in cities across the country. One example in particular is one that uses co-op financing. So something that's really only used in New York and then a lot in Europe, but has retooled that in a way that can work more broadly across the country to provide a financing tool for 6 to 10 unit developments that provide a small unit, like 1 to 2 bedrooms, and then a bunch of shared space in a really beautiful building. And the financing schema makes it so that it's accessible to a low wealth family at a moderate income level, and that they can buy into that and get full access to how the building may appreciate over time. And I point that out as an example because I think there's a lot of examples that we're working with right now that are, I'd say, in one way trying to carve a way for people who may otherwise be renters to get access to some type of ownership stake within real estate, that it may not be as, it's not as traditional, 30-year mortgage, single family home ownership option, but either it's through this type of co-op model, it's in a community collective, access through like a land trust model where a community owns the land and people own the houses on top of it, or through new models that are trying to have renters or community members own a piece of a new development in a neighborhood. We're seeing a lot of, we've worked with a lot of amazing leaders, particularly leaders of color, who are thinking through this from a strong racial equity framework of like who hasn't had the chance to own the land over the history of the United States, and how can we build these financial models that can create a more inclusive economy and more access to housing value in a community. So we're supporting a couple models like that we're really excited about. The co-op one is a group called Frolic in Seattle. Another one we're working with is called The Guild, which is working out of Atlanta. In addition to that, kind of on the other side, so thinking through who owns land, we have also done a ton of work around construction technology, as I mentioned. And so both supporting specific companies, but also thinking more broadly about investments we need to make in the market. Folks may be aware of this idea of industrialized construction, like moving a bit of more of home building from a specific site off to a factory. Mm-hmm. It's something that exists for mobile homes. Like that's how we build mobile homes right now. We build some single family homes through building some of these like panels or pieces of the house offsite. And we're seeing a lot of push and energy momentum about doing that for apartment buildings or other multifamily properties. But the industry is still immature. There's only a couple companies that can do this successfully. The market's not quite ready for them, so they really struggle to maintain a pipeline of builders who want to use that technology. And so we're thinking a lot about what does it look like to support a market in its early stage? Where can we support it with new financing products? What types of investments? We're working on a concept of a new innovation and lab space here out in California that can help reduce the cost of entry for new companies who have new technologies that can help reduce the cost of construction. And so to take a step back, part of why that's so important, as many on this call may know, is the actual construction cost per unit has gone up so much in the past few years. Like in California, we've seen that there's some properties, granted this is an extreme example, but there's at least dozens of properties that it's $1 million per apartment to build government subsidized housing. And so really trying to dig down both through thinking how regulation contributes to that, but also thinking of like the underlying construction mechanism as an area we're spending a lot of time.
Right. I mean, you're looking at supply costs as well. I mean, lumber has been very volatile, but at times extremely expensive. And the other basic supplies that go into building an apartment or a house have been very, very expensive at times during the pandemic. Are there alternative forms of construction that you're looking at? I mean, 3D printing is one that I've seen at different trade shows. Like, what are you seeing in that space?
Yeah, we are looking at a lot of different things. I don't think there's no alignment among the engineering or scientific community of any single silver bullet that's going to change the landscape. One area that we are looking a lot at is new wood products. So this is things like cross-laminated timber or mass timber, which are new ways of using wood that may not be construction grade, and it's like through standard milling practices, but then you can create a new type of like compressed wood, like really, really strong plywood, basically, that actually turns into a strong, more sustainable building material that can support high-rise development, which right now you can't build high-rise wood with standard kind of wood products. And so thinking through some of the questions that raises is you need to develop a supply chain, you need to change codes in order to allow that type of building. And so there's a lot of momentum around that, like new wood product area. Another construction space we're working with is both volumetric modular and panelized. So if you think about the different types of construction that could be different than just building a house on a lot, you can have everything from like volumetric on one side, which is like Lego boxes of apartments that you build in a factory and then you like set on site like Legos, to IKEA flat packs, like you get a box that has all the components for a house and you set it up on site, to something called kit of parts, which you have everything sent to you down to like the screw, and it's kind of like a color by numbers, like you place everything into place through the whole house. In the US, we've really focused recently on this volumetric construction, but in Europe and other markets where industrialized construction is more the norm, there's a lot more companies and innovation around panelized construction, in particular that IKEA version. And so something we're thinking a lot about is how we support more companies in that panelized space, which gets some of the benefits of volumetric construction, but offers a little more design flexibility than that Lego model, which is really important to Americans and in our community, is that design difference between houses. And so that's another area that we're spending a lot of time.
So we talked a little bit about zoning, and it's an important part of the equation. Lack of housing supply is one of the big factors leading to lack of housing affordability. It sounds like you're working with some zoning tech companies that are maybe changing the game a little bit. Do you want to talk a little bit about some of the efforts there to add more density?
Yeah, we're actually building, we have one of our own tools that came out of some Terner Center research, I believe 5 or 6 years ago, that we've now built up in a way that can serve city planners. So there's a lot of technology moving into zoning. Part of the reason it's hard to change zoning, especially in big cities, is that the policy tools available to city planners are really complicated. It's like, well, if you allow for a 4-story building instead of a 3-story building, but maybe that 4-story building isn't actually economically feasible for a developer to build. So you've changed the zoning code, but then nothing happens. And so there's a suite of tools out there that are trying to help developers and investors think about like evaluating potential sites. But we saw a gap around a tool that was really, for the need of a tool that was really built for city planners and for state governments to understand how a current zoning code can relate to the actual likelihood of a development being built. And so we've built a tool that is right now in use for the city of LA that allows them to toggle between like 20 some different policies and 20 some different economic conditions like inflation, et cetera, to then project out how under those conditions housing development may change across a city and may happen, and like how much of that housing is likely to be near transit or in climate risk areas, et cetera. And we're aiming to help city planners, especially in these more complex cities, think through all of the different zoning and policy tools that they have in their toolbox. And I think that level of analysis is important because even like a city planner who's really pro-housing may not even know how to help create that reality within their city. So that's another program that we're working on both across Terner Center and Labs.
So we had an audience question that asked about modified modular. So modular housing, I went to the International Builder Show last year and was blown away at the quality of the modular housing that was on site, that had been built off site and was constructed on site in like a couple of weeks. Mm-hmm. What's happening with modular?
If we think about modular, which often means like the volumetric, those Lego boxes that are produced off site and then carted on site, either for single family or multifamily. I think as I mentioned before, where that industry is still really new, we're seeing a couple companies that are reaching early stages of maturity, but for those in the tech world, they're still like Series B companies, like they're still pretty early. They may or may not have stable revenue. And developers who want to use those tools are often have only done 1 or 2 of those developments ever. And so within that environment, we're seeing a lot of inconsistency about whether a particular development that's built using modular actually achieves its own cost and timing goals that it sets out. And that's not we don't think that's because the underlying flaws in the technology, but more that it's the industry and the folks who are building kind of need to be building a couple of these to really be able to capture the cost savings. And we also need financial markets that support it. Right now, if you think about, for anyone involved in affordable housing, especially out in expensive environments, you have 17 different financing sources that go into an affordable housing development. That complexity of that makes it really hard for an affordable housing developer to work with a modular factory, which needs more like manufacturing style finance. And so there needs to be some evolution there in how we finance housing to allow it to work with these more industrialized processes. And so it's a long way of saying it's something that I believe in, I strongly believe can help reduce cost and increase housing supply. But the industry is still in early stages, and there's a lot more to be done to see it come to fruition and actually be the solution so many people hope it is.
Appreciate the time. We're at the end of our chat. Where can people find you if they want to follow up and ask some more questions?
Yeah, absolutely. So Terner Center is at ternercenter.berkeley.edu, I believe. Sorry. And then Terner Labs is ternerlabs.org. We're also the Housing Lab program I mentioned, which works with early stage entrepreneurs. We'll be opening our application in about 3 weeks for the next crop of entrepreneurs that we'll work with this year. And so if anyone on the call is interested or knows other folks in their community who are working on a cool idea across housing finance, please direct them towards us. And both labs and center have a newsletter where you can stay tuned about the things that we're working on.
Thanks so much, Michelle.